Hey guys, hope you had a good weekend. Couple quick announcements. So first of all, keep in mind that your essay on the Outsiders is due next Friday. I'm going to open up Turnitin submissions probably Monday or Tuesday of next week. If you are missing any assignments for me, if you have an A for absent or a 0 because you didn't do it, get those done, okay? I do not want you to wait until the last week and have to scramble to get them done while I'm also scrambling to get grades in and everything else, because there's a chance that something's going to fall through the cracks. Neither you'll forget to do it or I won't notice that you've done it, and we'll have to email back and forth, and it'll just be a hassle for everyone. It'll be stressful and it won't be fun. I really don't want to do that. Try to keep up with your work. Like I said, I'm being generous, letting you do it, weeks late. Just get it done for me this week, please. If you're behind, just try to catch up. Also, Outsiders test tomorrow. It's going to be 20 multiple choice questions, 5 points each. Should be really, really easy to get a good test grade on this. I'm going to review for it in just a second. I will have to pull it up on my computer screen, and so I'll probably put my phone down and you'll just see a blank screen for a minute, but you'll still be able to hear me talk. So hang in there through that. It's not going to be visually pleasant. So your thesis statements, I want those done today. It doesn't have to be perfect. I may give you some feedback if I think it needs some work, but I want you to post your thesis statement. It should be a 3-point thesis with, argument, because A, B, and C, dealing with the prompt that I gave you and in the last video from last week. So go back and watch that video if you don't remember it. It's asking about intertextuality in the Outsiders. I've had, one parent email me, not in a negative way at all, but just, showing some concern that intertextuality is kind of a sophisticated concept, and it absolutely is. I agree. But I'm not asking you to come up with anything crazy deep or complicated. I'm not going to grade you like that. You guys know sometimes I ask you questions that are a little bit above your grade level, but then I'm generous with how I grade them. This is kind of like that. And I gave you all those examples in the video last week. You can base it off of any of those. I'm going to give you an example thesis today. Now, don't copy this thesis. I don't assume any of you or many of you are probably doing the argument that I came up with anyway. So you don't have to necessarily worry about trying to come up with anything super crazy for the intertextuality. Like I said, it can just deal with characters and the way they change or the way the plot moves forward, just something to do with why those references to those other works are there. That's all I'm really looking for. And I think we're going to be done with vocab for the year. I thought about it, and last night I kind of decided, 12 of 15 vocab units is pretty good. I think it would have been a respectable amount if we'd had the whole year to do it. And I don't think Miss Renfro's class is going beyond that if they get to that point. So I think we should be at least in line with them, so you guys won't be behind or anything. If you want to look at units 13, 14, and 15, I'm sure absolutely none of you will. But if you want to, that opportunity is always there. But yeah, so no more vocab exercises, because I really want to focus on writing and giving you time to get this essay done over the course of the week. Like I said, that Outsiders test is tomorrow. I'm thinking about maybe doing something else with the Outsiders where I take the original short answer questions that were on that test and give them to you by themselves, rather, because I'm not putting them on the test. I want you to have plenty of time to do the multiple choice and get an easy grade in. But I may take the short answer questions that are, a paragraph each. I think there are 3 or 4 of them. And I may post those one day as a quiz grade and give you, a 50-point quiz grade on that. And that'll be graded a little bit more, I guess, strictly, but it should still be something that everyone gets, 40 out of 50 or above on, which is still a good grade and will still help a lot of you who are struggling for quiz grades. So hang in there for that. It won't be this week, though. It might be early next week, and no guarantee on that. I may change my mind. But anyway, let's look at this thesis statement and get a good idea of what a good thesis would look like. So S.E. Hinton's reference to Jack London's novels illuminates the cruelty and senselessness of the rumble, draws a comparison of the man versus society conflict of the Outsiders to the man versus nature conflicts of London's work, and points to a lack of free will on the part of the characters. Okay, so my argument is effectively that S.E. Hinton's reference to London's novels is showing this nature, this cruelty, and all of this. I'm arguing the importance of that. And then my 3 points are that it illuminates the cruelty and senselessness of the rumble, the big fight between the Socias and Greasers, because that's when this is referenced. It talks about how they're circling around the people in the middle like the dogs or wolves in London's work, like Call of the Wild or White Fang, and how they're waiting for someone to fall so they can all jump on them, basically. It draws a comparison of the man versus society conflict of the Outsiders, which we all noticed, we all pointed out pretty much, to the man versus nature conflicts of London's work. So it's like saying that society itself has natural laws, effectively, that there are people who are on top, there are people who are on bottom, and they're always going to be pitted against each other. She's drawing that comparison, which I think is a really sophisticated comparison for a 16-year-old to have written. I'm not sure if she intended it, but it definitely comes across that way to me. So that's another point, and I think that's a pretty strong one. And then the third one, and points to a lack of free will on the part of the characters. So that's a little bit more abstract, but I think it's the most important point out of it. So in Call of the Wild, or White Fang, if you've read that, because of the natural state of the things, the fact that these are dogs, they're wolves, they're obeying natural laws. They're not cruel, they're not evil, even though London does give them personality. These animals are just obeying their instincts. They're doing what they're naturally disposed to do. It seems as though in The Outsiders, Hinton wants us to think that most of our characters, like Dally or Johnny, are just doing what they have to do. Like when Johnny kills Bob, it's a natural reaction to his fear. It's a very primal, animalistic action. The same thing with Dally. When he's in grief over Johnny, he goes out and does something wild and crazy and pays the price. The fighting at the Rumble, like I said, there's a cruel senselessness to it. And because of that, all these points kind of tie in and echo each other. Now, your thesis, I don't expect to be this good. That's okay. I don't expect it to be worded like this. I don't necessarily expect it to be this long. Yes, 3-point thesis statements are kind of long usually, but they don't have to be like this. This is just an example of the kind of thing I'm looking for. But this is also a little bit more sophisticated than what I'm necessarily looking for from you. I'm not saying that you couldn't get a 100 with a thesis, not nearly on the level of this, because this is, a little bit higher level thesis, and that's okay. You'll write ones like this someday. Some of you aren't super far off now. So, but what I want you to notice is the fact that I'm talking about the actual prompt in each and everything. I'm talking about how we're referencing one text in The Outsiders. So we're referencing London's work in The Outsiders. And if I was going to do this, for a college paper, I'd probably pull quotes from Call of the Wild or White Fang, and I'd compare them across. But that's not what I'm looking for here. You don't have to quote anything from the secondary source. I do want some quotes, and I'll tell you more about that later in the week, from The Outsiders. But that shouldn't be hard. That's something you guys have experience with. It's something you've done before. Just quoting a primary source isn't too much trouble. And you should be good at that. And I'll do like a formatting review and all that for citations later in the week. But what I'm wanting you to do is come up with 3 points. They don't have to tie together as neatly as the 3 I've come up with here. All these kind of build on each other, and that's the ideal for a thesis, but you don't have to be at that level right now. I just want 3 points that have to do with, why is this being referenced in The Outsiders? Why is Gone with the Wind talked about so much in The Outsiders? Why is Nothing Gold Can Stay so important in The Outsiders? Why does S.E. Hinton talk about Paul Newman at the beginning and end of the book? Any of those things, if you just said something about, Ponyboy and Johnny's relationship with Nothing Gold Can Stay and the way they change as characters, if you talked about Gone with the Wind and, Dally and Johnny and the gallant Southern gentleman, any of those things, I think, are good enough for me. I just want 3 distinct points. And the big thing is they need to be separate, okay? So the cruelty and senselessness of the Rumble, the conflict, and then the lack of free will in the characters. I'm talking about 3 separate incidents that are all thematically linked. Yours can be, I'm trying to keep them from being too similar is the point I'm trying to make. I'm trying to get you not to make the same point twice or 3 times, which some of you have a tendency to do, and I understand that. That's why I want to see your thesis statements today, so I can tell you, hey, look back at point B, it's the same as point A, that kind of thing. But the other thing is that I want you to be able to support your arguments, okay? When I typed up this thesis a few minutes ago, I was thinking while I was doing it, could I support this point if I was writing this essay? And yeah, I think I could come up with plenty of evidence for all 3 of these. If you've got a point that feels, tenuous, shaky, and you don't think you can come up with evidence for it, it's not a good point. Maybe you're not certain and you're like, I'm not positive. And you say, hey, Mr. Jones, do you think that there's ample evidence to support this? Like, do you think this is arguable? And I'm going to say, yes or no, and I might tell you, hey, look at page blah, 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 blah. I'll always give you feedback if you ask for it. So feel free to, message me, email me, whatever. Send me what you're working on, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. So the other thing that I just said is it needs to be arguable, okay? So you don't need to say Nothing Gold Can Stay is important to Ponyboy. Like, yeah, it is, but that's not an argument. Why is it important to him? What does it mean to him? That's the argument. And we've talked about that a good bit. And most of you in some of our short answer questions have given really good answers to that sort of thing already. So look back at some of those if you're unsure, and look at some of your short answer because some of them had to do with this. But all of these points you could disagree with. You could say, the Rumble's not cruel and senseless. It's just some people fighting over an issue that matters to them. There's it might be cruel, but there's sensibility to that. Draws a comparison of man versus society to man versus nature. You might disagree with that. You might say, I don't think it's talking about the man versus nature. I just think it's a one-off reference to London's books and the way they were circling. I just think it's an image, not a theme. And points to a lack of free will on the part of the characters. You might say, no, I think all these characters have free will, and I think this is the point that you could argue with the most. I don't necessarily 100% agree with the point, but it's a good point. You might say, I think all the characters have free will, and I think they show it constantly. That would be fine too. But what I'm saying is you could disagree with every one of these. That needs to be the case with your points. They need to be arguments, okay? The point of an essay is to create an argument and then support it. The thesis is that argument condensed into one sentence. Then it's your job to support it. This comes, again, at the end of your introduction, last sentence of your intro, and it is the most important sentence in your essay, so make sure you put some effort into them, okay? Now I'm going to set the phone down so you're not going to be able to see anything for a little bit, but I'm going to talk about the multiple choice questions for the outsiders test, so just bear with me. I'll try to make this pretty quick. I'll tell you the kind of things you need to know. And I know a lot of you are probably going to flip through your book tomorrow when you take the test or look up answers online and things like that. I'd prefer you didn't. So if you're honorable, please don't. But, if it's not the end of the world if you do either. I'm not going to know. I'm not going to yell at you. I'm just assuming that most of you will. So anyway, here we go. All right. So if I ask you about the associations of the gang and the characters, obviously you need to know who all the greasers are. You need to know about the intertextual references that we mentioned. So who starred in the movie Ponyboy went to see? Obviously Paul Newman. We've talked about that. If I ask you who's Pony's oldest brother, remember Derry's the oldest. I might ask you about where Soda and Derry work, like what jobs they do. Soda's a gas station attendant. Derry works doing roofs. I might ask you where Dally is from. Pony makes a point early in the novel to tell us that Dally is from New York. He grew up watching gang fights and saw people get killed. I might ask you about Cherry and who she says she could fall in love with, talking about Dally, obviously, and we remarked on how similar he may have been to Bob. I ask you which Soch Johnny stabs. That one's pretty obvious. We know it's Bob, and I'm realizing, some of you may just listen to this video back while you take the test. Don't do that. What sport was Derry really good at in school? Remember they talked about football and his relationship with Paul as running back. Which sport does Ponyboy participate in? This isn't as important in the novel, but it's remarked on a couple times because he could have such a promising future in it, but he doesn't follow it, or at least hasn't to the point that we're at now. He's a track runner. He's supposed to be pretty good at it. Who is the youngest greaser? Now, some of you are going to be tempted to say Johnny here, but Johnny was 16, Ponyboy was 14. Ponyboy is the youngest by a couple years, but he and Johnny are close, and they act like they're about the same age. So where do Ponyboy and Johnny hide out? In Old Church on top of a hill. What book do Ponyboy and Johnny read? This one should be pretty obvious. It's Gone with the Wind, okay? That's the only novel they read. Nothing Gold Can Stay is just a short poem, because like I said, it's quoted in full in the book, and it doesn't take up a page. What happened to Ponyboy's parents? This is something that's mentioned briefly, I think a couple times, but they were in a car accident, okay? They died in a car accident. What does Dally give Ponyboy and Johnny? He gives them money and a gun. He gives Ponyboy his jacket, but I didn't put that as part of the options. Money and a gun is all you'll need to know there. How does Johnny get fatally injured? Obviously, he's rescuing the kids from the fire. The flaming beam of wood falls across his back. Which Soch decides to avoid the rumble? Randy, obviously, he has that conversation with Ponyboy at the diner in his car. He tells him, I'm done with it. I can't be part of it anymore. Then what happens to Dally after Johnny dies? He commits suicide by cop, effectively. He goes and robs a store and then points an unloaded gun at the cops, gets shot down. What food does Ponyboy insist everything tastes like after Johnny's death? Bologna. This is the thing that they ate a ton of while they were in the church. He decides that he doesn't like bologna. He talks about it in his sleep. It becomes kind of an obsession for him because I think it reminds him of that time hiding out with Johnny. And then what does Johnny leave to Ponyboy? A book, Gone with the Wind. He obviously leaves that copy of the book with him. And those are the 20 multiple choice questions. Like I said, it's really easy. Maybe 2 or 3 aren't super obvious right off. And like I said, most of you will probably use the resources available to you. That's okay. Uh, there will be no video tomorrow, just the test. That's all I want you to do tomorrow. Just make sure you get it done. 20 questions. It'll be a 100-point test grade, just like any other test we've ever taken. It's a really good opportunity to pull your grade up if you're struggling, or to keep it high if you're already up there. So focus on that tomorrow, and then the next day, Wednesday or Wednesday or Thursday, depending on which class you are. We'll get into some more things about the essay, talk about topic sentences, and towards the end of the week, like I said, we'll do citations and formatting. But anyway, that should be pretty straightforward. Should be a pretty light week as far as work. Mainly just working on the essay and talking about that. All right, see you guys.